Welcome to Stand By Please.
With me, Antonia Collins from the Bamboo Manager Project.
And me, Jacqui George from Sharjah Performing Arts Academy.
In this podcast, we talk all things stage management. Join us and our guests as we try to answer the question, what is your stage manager really thinking?
Here we are again.
I can't believe that we first talked about creating a podcast 8 weeks ago. I think we first discussed it the very first week of the lockdown in the UK, and we are now in week 8. And for me, it was a really happy coming together of things because I really wanted to do a podcast. But I think when we started those conversations, we never imagined. We did know, don't get me wrong, we weren't naive. We did know that it would go on. But now I'm sat looking at the diary going, goodness me, week 8, wow.
How long did you think we'd be sort of in that position?
Because stage managers are planners, aren't we? I had 2 tactics to start off with. The first tactic I went for was how long the government was saying between reviewing the situation. So they were going for a 3-week strategy. So I was like, okay, well, I can deal with things in batches of 3 weeks. That's okay. But then in reality, 3 weeks isn't long enough. So I then went to the news and looked at how many weeks Wuhan was on lockdown before it was reopened. And somehow I came up with the date of June 22nd with us mirroring the same amount of weeks. Clearly, I feel now that was slightly misguided. So we'll get to June 22nd and see where we're at in the UK. But I don't know, what it's like for you over in Sharjah, but here it just feels a bit like, now I feel like we're in limbo land.
I think things started to close down here about 2 weeks before the UK. So when we first started talking about this, with my stage management head on, I started to plan all those things that have been on my list and things I wanted to do professionally and personally. And you know what? Initially they said 5 weeks. Schools would be closed for 5 weeks, etc. Then we'd reassess. We're at the end of our 10th or 11th week of lockdown situation. I was worried initially that we wouldn't be in lockdown long enough for me to get my to-do list done.
That is such a stage management response, isn't it? I don't know, is your list getting shorter? My list just kind of keeps going around in a circle.
I think it is getting shorter. Maybe it's because now I'm getting a bit more blasé about things. I'm like, well, that can wait.
So when we first started, I decided that I would make, this is hysterical now, that I would make 6 different categories of activities that I would do a day. And my aim was to do 4 out of 6 of them a day. So one of the categories was reading, one was exercise, and I can't remember what they all were now. One was like work things, so like recording the podcast, that would have ticked the work box. And I kind of was like, as long as I'm doing 4 out of these 6 things a day, that'll be okay. 2 weeks in, I had to go to 3 out of 6, and then I've given up totally.
You can change those boundaries.
I am somebody who in real life hates routine. I totally take after my mother. If you've gone and done something once, she doesn't want to do it again. And I feel very much the same way in life. And yet in work, I crave to be in an environment that's got all that structure to it. When you're putting on a show night after night, you're putting the same show on, aren't you? You don't think, oh, do you know what? I think I'll call those cues in a different order today just to break the routine. You don't do that. And it's weird now at this moment where I don't have the routine of going to work. And it's incredible how quickly you slip into, or certainly we have slipped into in our household, sleeping late, working late, just doing totally different things. The thought of getting up and going to work now seems like quite a long way off.
It's maybe slightly flipped in our house. We've had to rigidly stick to the routine in the week. And then the weekends where it sort of all goes out the window. But I think that may be to do with we've got a 7-year-old in the house and we're still sort of working remotely, the alarm is still on.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Because, of course, we've got an 18-year-old with us, so we're on a different time frame to a 7-year-old. And we have lots of work to do. I've got students who are studying with me online, and I decided that I was going to rewrite some of the courses and take a bit of an opportunity to reevaluate some of the things. So we have lots of work to be doing, but I guess we're just being a bit more flexible with it. But it's difficult to know what's best. Last weekend, I was totally adamant, and I said, Saturday and Sunday, I'm not doing any work. I worked really hard all week, and I was like, no, forget it. And then we got to Monday, and I was like, oh, do you know what? I think this weekend I am going to work some of Saturday and Sunday, because I was a bit lost without the anchor of work, if you see what I mean.
That's how you can effectively work from home, because and whether that's a definite outcome that you have to deliver something by a certain time, or whether that's working from home and you're creating your own work pattern, whether that's, learning a new skill or whatever it may be. And we talk about the peripheries of working from home for me. So, you have a nice desk and you might get yourself some new stationery, or you might, you make your environment. But the true effectiveness of working from home comes in how you manage it. And I think that those boundaries, it doesn't have to be, well, I'm at my desk by 8:30 and then I finish at 4, but then you still have to create the boundaries that okay, when I close the laptop, that's the end of my work time, or that it doesn't all just drift into one. I think that's the danger for me, is that I'm sending an email with a film on quiet in the background, or I have to differentiate those spaces. But I think the true effectiveness of working from home, that means I could be working 6 till 10 in the evening and not 9 till 5, isn't it?
I've been trying to think about it in blocks of time. So I want to certainly achieve 3 hours of work on my courses a day. I've been trying to kind of see it in that light. But one of the things I have instigated is I'm really only doing or trying to only do tutorials and Zoom chats and that kind of thing on Tuesdays and Thursdays, because my entire life was being taken up by different things. And I've not wholly succeeded in that, because maybe I've been asked to talk at a webinar and that's been on a Friday or whatever, and that's fine. By next week, I might have abandoned that. Who knows? And I think that's the point, isn't it? We don't know. We're in a very unusual territory. This isn't just working from home. So trying to deal with all of the feelings that go with that, and then trying to work from home with the things that go with that, it's a complicated mix. And I think you should kind of be kind of quite forgiving with yourself, because if you try one thing and it doesn't work, well, hey, try a different thing and find out what works for you. I think there's no straight answer. You can't say you must do this or you must do that, because it doesn't work like that.
And what's really fascinating, certainly in the performing arts world, is that we're starting to see those responses from across the world. And isn't it fascinating how different they are? So from the same situation, numerous countries are in lockdown, industry is stopped in all capacities, whether it's commercial, whether it's engineering, whether it's art. But we're seeing different responses, and certainly in the theatre world, we're seeing those different responses internationally, and how vast and varied they are.
Well, and where you're really seeing the difference at the moment is in the States. And I know America's huge, but there are very, very different responses between different states. I want to say it was Minnesota, but I might have made that up. I feel like it was somewhere that began with an M, and they are programming for work this summer. Whereas lots of other places have just gone, no, forget it. The Guthrie, they're not doing anything live, I think, till March 2021 now. Yeah, every day I read a different article with a different take on it from America, and I'm like, wow, okay. It's and obviously New York is a totally different thing again, because they've got so many more cases. They're now closed till September, I I think I read September, but just the different tactics and the different approaches. Whereas here, I think in the UK we've moved a lot of work online. There's been much more kind of let's create some new work online. The Sherman Theatre in Cardiff have got some lovely little plays, 10-minute plays going on. That actually I've watched a few of those and I've quite enjoyed those. So actually the creation of new work to me seems to be happening a lot here.
Do you think we should be thinking about starting when we do go back, how that is, or do you think we should be focusing on creating that work online?
I wish I had a crystal ball, Jacqui. I think it's really difficult. I've been asked by a few people as to what do I think, the future of stage management is, and where do stage management fit in the online creation of work. And obviously, I do know some stage managers who are currently employed, who are working on Zoom recordings and different things, doing all the things that we would recognise, Personally, I am looking forward to when we can go back to creating theatre when we're all in the same room. I was watching the Michelle Obama documentary on Netflix last night. I love her, she's amazing. And she was talking about how she decided to go on an arena book tour for the launch of her book. And she was talking about the power of gathering together. And for me, that's so true of theatre. It's that idea that you're going to create something, and then you're going to gather together to create something, and then you're going to gather together with people to show them what you've created. And I kind of, although I appreciate all the online stuff that's happening, and I love the way that people are being totally inventive and thinking about things, but I want to plan for when we can come back together to make art.
I so agree with you. I feel, I was thinking about this. I love theatre. I like going to the theatre. And I started to ask myself, when there was a huge choice, and I think we're so guided now by social media, there's this huge choice. Well, I can go and see this musical tonight. I can go and see something on Broadway tomorrow. When I say go, I mean figuratively and not literally. And then I sort of stopped and I sat back and I said to myself, how often would I normally go to the theatre? In an ideal world, when there were no sort of personal commitments or financial commitments, maybe I'd go once a week. So I feel like there's this pressure because of all this content that's being created, that's being provided, that, do I go every night? Do I go every other night? Do I still go once a week? So I think as an audience, as much when we're an audience physically going to theatre, we have a choice of where we want to spend our money and what we want to go and see. We still have that choice remotely. And I think that's what we're maybe not making sure we're not allowing ourselves, I think, to make the choice of what we want to see. Theatre online can work and absolutely does have a place if it's done well. Otherwise, I'll look to the mediums that do work on a screen, All the streaming services that are available, they do it amazingly well because that's what they're designed for when you create a TV show or a film. But I do think that maybe there's a knee-jerk response to get content online and expect everyone to watch it because we're all at home.
Absolutely. And I am so happy that it seems to have calmed down a bit because those first few weeks were like a tsunami of stuff. I watched the Royal Court Cyprus Avenue that's available. All stage managers should watch it, if just for the cleanup at the end. Cream carpet, it's not pleasant, I tell you. But that was filmed by The Space professionally. So again, it's got quite a filmatic feel about it. But otherwise, no, I'm just going to sit tight for a bit. Somebody asked me about what my, if I got a motto for this moment in time. And I'm going with positive but realistic, because I feel like we need to be positive, but we need to be realistic about how long this is going to go on for, and also the fact that it's going to be different when eventually we can go back to work.
And there's some beautiful responses out there that doesn't revert to making work. I think it was the Lyceum in Edinburgh that had this, or they're still ongoing. You can make a section of what the going to the theatre means for you, and then you send it to them, and then making that into a pair of house tabs that will always hang. And I think those sorts of responses feel emotionally right and of the moment. Going forward, next week, next month, next year, whenever we get there, how do you think we as stage managers need to or will be responding to the new normal?
I think it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because I've read quite a lot of different articles about how people feel the world of stage management will have changed, as well as the world of theatre will have changed. And in the UK particularly, I feel we are going to be asked to take on extra responsibilities, or certainly be involved in that. You know, there's a lot of talk online about having some kind of health manager on a show who would take people's temperatures and would maintain the health of the show. And in an ideal world, of course, that would be a separate role, but I can't imagine in the UK that that's going to be a thing. Can you?
No. And where does that responsibility end? Do we say, oh, no, you can't do that scene because there's lots of hugging in it?
I'm a stage manager who doesn't have their first aid certificate anymore. I deliberately chose not to renew mine because I didn't want the responsibility. So, you know, I will say to somebody who cuts themselves or whatever, I always joke and say, oh, I can manage kind of mother level first aid. You know, if you're a small child and you graze your knee in the playground, I can deal with that. But I choose not to be the on-site first aider. Now, I would probably choose not to be the on-site person taking the temperatures. Does that mean then that I wouldn't be employed on a show because I'm not willing to do that? I think it opens up a whole can of worms. And it's also, I do hope that what will come out of this will be some kind of empowerment that means we don't feel terrible if we have to phone in sick. Because, and I mean this for actors and for stage managers, you know, we go to work. How many times have you been to work where you feel horrific, or you've been vomiting in the morning and you're like, no, I can go in and call the show, it'll be fine? Well, that's kind of crazy, actually, when you step back and think about it a bit. So I do think in terms of how we plan shows moving forward, we should definitely, producers should definitely be thinking more about how do you cover people if they are off sick. Obviously, in rehearsal, that's one thing, but when we're in shows, that's a different thing. But I do feel it's time to literally call time on that mentality of, I don't care whether you're dying, you've got to go to work.
And I think this will be the driving force for it. I think we all have that the show must go on mentality, and that's not always to the benefit of the production and the people in it. Do we have the capacity to understudy everything, to allow us the time? That needs to be reflected in the budgets then going forward, doesn't it? And whether that can be and will be is the big question. Theatre buildings aren't necessarily always designed to hold the casts and the companies that we put into them.
Oh, you've got to be 2 meters apart in a dressing room. One of the articles I've read, and I've no idea which one it was now because I've literally read so many, was talking about whether or not the result will be a shorter working day for rehearsals, or maybe definitely always having a Saturday and Sunday off. And the point was that it would give people time to rest and recuperate, about trying to keep people in the best health that they could be in. But again, it's a massive cost implication. If you're hiring a venue to put your show on, you're going to say, well, we were going to tech for 5 days and now we're going to tech for 10. That's a massive cost implication.
There's two duties of care, aren't there? There's the duty of care to the company that's actually producing the show, so it's keeping those safe. And then there's the duty of care to the audience. Plus, you have a remit of sticking within a budget, within a time frame, within external parties' guidelines, whether that's arts councils, finances, whatever that may be. So if we look at a theatre, I think I read somewhere they were looking at a theatre with a 1,500 seat capacity, and they were going to programme that and only sell it to 500.
We all know that, when you're front of house in a theatre, how close the seats are. Gosh, I mean, on Broadway, the seats are so close together, it's untrue, in some of those older theatres, and you're in a queue to get into the auditorium, you're then in a queue to go to a restroom, you're in a queue to pick up the tickets, the whole thing would need to be rethought. And I think ultimately that will be the biggest issue, is persuading an audience that it's safe to come back to the theatre. The only thing I keep hanging on to is, SARS happened in Hong Kong in 2002, 2003, and everywhere was closed. It was a very similar situation, and audiences did come back and theatre did start again, and people did go, albeit with face masks on, and lots of hand sanitizer, but those things did pick up again. So I do believe we will get there, but it's going to take a while to work out some of the different permutations.
Here's something I've been thinking about. We've been having sort of conversations on Zoom and we go, I can't wait to see you. If I was there right now, I'd give you a hug. Without casting stereotypes, it's fair to say that people working in theatre aren't afraid of giving a hug. What are the hug rules now? Do we hug? No. How do you monitor that?
But it's got to be about personal responsibility, hasn't it? At the end of the day, the only people who are really responsible for what we are willing to do or not do are us. So maybe you are somebody who says, I don't really want to hug anybody anymore. So then you can do the bumpy elbows thing or the kicking feet thing. Or maybe you're somebody who's like, no, do you know what? I'm just going to carry on the way I always was. So I guess, there's got to be some personal decisions in there. I did see in one of the articles they were talking about maybe no more meet and greets and no more first night parties. But I get what they were saying about the meet and greet thing, where you've literally got everybody from the company there. You probably don't need to do that.
Okay, so we're not bringing somebody on a train for 4 hours to come to a meet and greet. They could be there virtually or whatever that context is. But then I think, do stage managers have to be the hug police?
I quite like that title. I'd rather be the hug police than the health manager.
On a sustainability level, as far as carbon footprint goes, it's got to be better.
I think there are plenty of times, actually. I've always thought this. It's always been the same, that you could Skype into a production meeting. Like you say, you don't have to come on the train for 4 hours for a 1 hour meeting and then go back again. Of course you don't. And I think that's a very positive thing that has come out of all of this, that lots of people who before might have said, I don't think you can do things in that way, now are like, shall we have a Zoom meeting? And you're like, yes, we can have a Zoom meeting. That's absolutely fine. And certainly, I don't know about you, Jacqui, but I've saved a fortune on takeaway coffee because I don't go anywhere and I could just drink my own coffee. I was thinking when this all started, I should have, every time I would have purchased a takeaway coffee, I should have put the money in a pot just to see how much money I would have saved. But there were loads of times I've been certainly called to London for a meeting when I probably could have done it online and I didn't really need to go. So I think people really will consider that as a viable option now, and I don't see why not. I think the events industry particularly are going to be much harder hit, I imagine, than even the theatre industry is, because that could be a long time until you're going to see a big festival happen again. But if we don't remain positive, then we might as well give up now. There's got to be good things that are going to come out of this, and there'll be bad things that come out of this. But eventually it will happen again because people want to go to the theatre.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Stand By Please.
Join us next time when we'll be standing by Simon Curtis, Equity UK's candidate for General Secretary, as we'll be discussing all things community. Until then, Jacqui and Antonia, off cans.